Hi Wendy, Muzz I Evolve, and I'm ready to do your channeling. I've spent the last hour to an hour and a half going over your answers to the questionnaire and also the additional answers you sent me through the email. I've read them multiple times. So I've got quite a good feeling for you and the energy which is sort of contemporary where you are at your life right now. So, and also because you are Wendy, you're Thor's Wendy, I've decided to bring you forward in the queue because obviously Thor is someone dear and special to me and you're dear and special to him. So by process of connection, I've decided to bring you forward. And you also, you were sweet and kind enough to answer my questions really quickly. So you've earned your spot. You've earned your spot, and don't worry, you didn't push somebody out of the queue. I've asked a few people to send me the materials I need to do their channeling, and you were the first to do it. So rather than wait for the others, I've decided I'll just squeeze you in and we'll do your channeling now. Okay, so there's definitely a lot there. I can feel it. So how about we get into it and you get to hear what there is there for you. Okay, here we go. Greetings, Wendy. Thank you for placing your trust in our ability to bring to you some of these answers and clarifications that you're seeking in regard to this moment of change you are passing through in your life. So there is certainly something here for you, and we are quite pleased to be the conduit to bring this to you. We have some insight through our perspective, vibratory at a elevated level to the earth human plane. So that provides us with a perspective which is not as easily accessed from the earth human experience. But also, much of the information we'll be bringing through today will be coming from yourself, coming from your higher aspect, coming from also your guides. So, in some regard, this will be you literally speaking to yourself or delivering a message to yourself. So, before we begin addressing these questions specifically, let us first sort of set a foundation or paint a picture of what we perceive where you are at this time. So, you are, from our perspective, like an elastic band. We're going to use this analogy. You are quite abundant in spiritual gifts. However, because of the type of upbringing you had, it acted for most of your life as a type of anchor that was preventing you, or a barrier, preventing you from discovering this part of yourself, from accessing part of this availability, this potential that you possess. And so it can be thought of as like the elastic band being pulled back. As more weeks, months and years pass of you not accessing this part of you, the elastic band was stretched further and further and further and further until you reached the point of release. And so now that you have reached this point of release where the band has been let go, because this barrier, which was between you and your spiritual self, has dissipated or crumbled or evaporated. And so now you have been launched, like the elastic band, like the catapult, into your spiritual aspect. And this is why you are feeling like you are going through exponential growth, because you are literally exploding. You are like the wound spring waiting to be released, and you have been released. So what we are perceiving about your energy is that there is a lot of purple in your aura, and the purple color does signify this birthing into your spiritual aspect. So the third eye chakra is sometimes known as the purple chakra because it represents your connectivity in some regard to your spiritual aspect. And the reason that you see the purple flame is because it is so prevalent to this phase of your life. It's so beneficial to you, and it is so aligned with your higher self desire to move into this part of you, to expand into your extra dimensionality, existing less as the 3D being you know yourself as in this lifetime, the Wendy being, and start considering of yourself more as the infinite, invulnerable, immortal. So the doorway into this aspect of yourself is through the third eye when speaking in a chakra sense. And this is the reason that you see these purple flames. And when Thor says that he is the purple flame, it is in a metaphorical sense because he is existing very much in the spiritual aspect of himself. He's very expanded into his extra dimensionality, even to the point where it could be argued that it is a detriment because he is living in a slightly unbalanced way here, where he is very expanded into his extra dimensionality and becoming less and less so rooted or grounded into the 3D physical. Because each of you, when you are incarnated, are a composite being. You are the spiritual being, which you always are. You are the eternal spiritual being. But you are also having a physical experience. And so therefore, in a practical sense, you are a composite being. In the true essence of who you are, you're entirely energetic, entirely spiritual. But in the practical matters of having an incarnation, you are a composite being. So to function at a high level, it's important that you have a balanced focus on your composite parts, meaning that you are focused on your spirituality, but you also are not neglectful of the physical aspect. So what Thor is able to do is he's able to be a gravitational pull, pulling you deeper into your spiritual realm, into your extra dimensionality. And he is summoning you through the aperture of your third eye, of your purple chakra. And this is why there is this sort of overlapping of meaning, where you are seeing the purple flame and he is recognizing that is related to him. So, in some regard, you and Thor are like yin and yang, because, as you said, you feel that you are a mirror of each other. The way that we see it is the two of you are very complementary. It is of great benefit to both of you that you have encountered each other at this time. And of course, it is not by accident, but rather it could be said almost to a degree that it has been ordained, or rather that it has been agreed upon prior to this incarnation, that when the timing was right, you would find each other and support each other through a particular phase of your life where it was of great benefit to both of you to have each other in your lives. So, it is true that you have a history other than this particular lifetime. And in this history that you've had together before, you are very important to each other. It could be said that you are in sharing a soul group. This would not be inaccurate. In this particular lifetime, Thor's purpose in regard to your experience is to pull you into the spiritual realm through the aperture of your purple chakra, the third eye. And your purpose in regard to how it serves Thor is to keep him balanced in the 3D, in the physical, give him grounding so that he does not become lost in the spiritual realm. and you have perceived yourself that he goes very deeply into the spiritual realm, and he brings back information which is very fringe, very on the edges, and it is difficult at times to accept that what he has said is so. So, let us address this. Now, first we wish to say that, and this is something we are sure you have perceived, Thor is extremely sincere. He is a very honest and beautiful energy, and his perception of these things is extremely advanced compared to what is typical for a human being at this time. So, in the broadest definition of reality, of existence, there is nothing which can be thought of or imagined that does not exist in some way. Now, let us explain this more fully. So, all entities which are individuations of the One are manifestors, not creators. Only the One can create. And all others within the One perceive. They perceive something through the process of manifestation. So they manifest it through their state of beingness until eventually there is a resonance of energy signature with the energy of that reality that they actually shift into the same experience. And now you perceive it. So what you have done is you have manifested into your perception something from existence, something that already existed. Because it is not possible to create something into existence from non-existence. By virtue and definition, non-existence is non-existence. It cannot exist in any way. So nothing can be created from it into existence. Non-existence is non-existence. Meaning that if it can be perceived, if it can be imagined, if it can be thought of, then it already exists. Because it is impossible to imagine something that does not exist. Because if you are imagining it, then you are creating into existence something from non-existence. Okay, so the reason for saying this is to illustrate that there is nothing which Thor says which is not actually already existing. It all exists. However, the more important perspective is it relevant? Because Thor is reaching so deep out onto the fringe that he is bringing back information which may be true in some way. Because if he can imagine it, then it already exists. However, it may not be relevant to who you are as you know yourself in this incarnation. Because there are an infinite number of versions of you. And there are an infinite number of versions of Thor. So, clearly there are some versions of you and there are some versions of Thor where this information, which is true, is nonetheless irrelevant to the life that you are living. So, in that regard, we suggest to you that you just go with your intuitive feeling. And when Thor says things which you feel just cannot be so, accept that on some level they are so. They are the truth. And Thor has an ability to reach very deeply. However, if it does not feel congruent with you, then take that to mean that probably at this time it is not relevant. So, you do not necessarily need to reject it, but you can decide to perceive of it with some interest and curiosity, but not integrate it into your beingness or use it as some basis for making decisions going forward. So trust your feeling in that regard. So One more thing we will say about Thor is that Thor has, in all incarnations where we have encountered Thor, he has always been a very fringe thinker. He's always been the personality which was pushing himself further than everybody else to discover the things that yet had not been discovered. This is a very fundamental characteristic of the soul of Thor. And so even in the incarnation where we have known him most familiarly is as the Arcturian brother. And in this particular life as we knew him, he was considered to be a very forward thinker, as to be somebody that was highly intelligent and unusually competent. And so it was his delight to be always on the frontier, to be always pushing the boundaries as a sense of adventure to discover what he is capable of, but also as a demonstration to others of his ability. Not so much as a prideful thing, but as an example to incite others to push themselves into greater versions of themselves. So this explosion you're having into your extra-dimensional space, the discovery of your spiritual self, it is an explosion. Usually those that go through their spiritual awakening come into it much more slowly than you have. But because you had such a strong, regimented religious experience, or experience of religion as a child, this has been a very almost impermeable barrier between you and your spiritual side. And now that it has dropped down, the inundation or the explosion is unusual. And so to some degree, there is probably going to be a feeling at times of being overwhelmed, of feeling that it is just too much, is more than you can handle. And so if it was to turn down in volume somewhat, it would be more manageable. So the way that this is sort of presenting in your life, or the way that we can see it presenting in your life, is that you are surrounded by a very dense bubble of purple energy. You have so much sort of spiritual energy swirling around you. However, it is somewhat still unappreciated, meaning that you do not yet have a full conscious awareness of how much there is surrounding you, because it is a dense purple auric field we are perceiving of you, which is not what we usually see. Usually see sort of more variants of color, whereas yours is very predominantly purple. So this is the same as saying it is unnuanced, it is unrefined, and that is why it is just kind of a total inundation of your auric field with this one color. As you get a handle on your spirituality and you start to refine it and understand it and develop a relationship with it that is coming from a perspective of self-understanding, then it will start to refine in the way that it presents in your auric field, and you will start to take on more of a gradients of color. So you will have the purple will diffract into other colors in your auric field, and you'll start to have a greater sense of your own ability. So this is just the process. It does not mean that you are broken or there's something wrong, but because you have been inundated in the way that you were, because you kind of went through this awakening, then this is just consequential to that. So having Thor in your life at this time is very beneficial for accomplishing this establishment of nuance in your auric field. because he will able to share with you his understanding of the spiritual realm, but also his energetic state will just create a resonance in you where you will start to develop this nuance within self, really just as a effect of being in the energetic field of Thor. So in a sense, he will be like the tuning fork and sending out a very refined spiritual vibration, which will create a resonance in you. And this will help you to bring in this own sort of spiritual clarification into self. And this last thing we'll say regarding you and Thor is that understand that you are important for Thor at this time, because you are giving him the grounding into the 3D. So another way this could be said is that you are giving him a reason to be invested in this physical experience that he is currently experiencing through the incarnation as Thor. Because he was losing his attachment to the 3D. And as he loses his attachment and drifts further into his spiritual realm, it will start to be painful for him. And also he will become so detached from the reality that he will begin to be perceived by others as somebody that is entirely so odd that it feels like it is just too weird. So it's not because he is broken or malfunctioning, but literally because he's so spiritual. So your ability will be to help ground him into the physical realm. So you are as important to him as he is important to you. Regarding your first question about your career path, how are you going to generate money? Because of this tonality you have in your energetic field, it usually implies that you have strong clairvoyant gifts, that you are able to see into other people. Certainly the potential exists for you to be able to see into someone in a very deep and insightful way, and to be able to access understanding about them that is not actually available to them. So you'll be able to see deeper into them than they can see into themselves. At the moment, this energy is still unrefined. It is still existing as potential, but really without sort of a practical understanding. So what we suggest is that you start doing readings for other people. And the way that this could be begun is just by doing readings for free. It is not something that you charge for, but you're doing it really just for the joy of it and as an exercise to hone these abilities. So you start bringing focus into this clairvoyant ability that you have been very naturally gifted with. So what we would suggest is that you find a spiritual group. Perhaps it is a group of men and women that meet each other once every 2 weeks. And you sit around and discuss the spiritual books and the spiritual experiences and your meditations. And then part of that evening is also devoted to doing readings for each other. So, through this process, you'll be able to hone your abilities. If this is something which you can't do, meaning that you can't find a group and start spending time with them, then do it just for your immediate friends. Ask them if you could do a reading for them. And one of the ways which is great to start is that you do it through psychometry, meaning that you ask to hold an item of theirs that they use often. So there's a lot of energy in it. We would say preferably not a phone, because a phone is a transmitter of a vast array of energies and sort of spiritual set points and psychological perspectives, which would give you a muddied impression. So, but other items like a pen or a watch or a piece of jewelry, a ring, a necklace, an earring, these can give a very strong impression of somebody, and then you can do a reading on that basis. And then when you do the reading, just be very honestly sincere in conveying what it is you sense about this particular person, the owner of that item. And then you can go a layer deeper where you ask the person or the people in your life who are willing to do that if they have someone in their family, if they have a partner or a child that also may be interested in receiving a reading. And then just ask that next time they meet, bring an item, piece of jewelry, from this other person, and you can do a reading on that as well. When you do your readings, we strongly recommend that you record them and that you listen to them back. You can provide the recording to the person who is receiving the reading, but very valuable is for you to review and analyze the reading that you did. And then from that, you can slowly start to develop a sense of self-knowing about your own clairvoyant abilities. And you will very naturally improve. And with this review process, improve even faster. Once you have got to a level of satisfactory ability, competency, then we would say it is now time to start doing readings and charging for them. So, the caveat here is that you do the readings before you think you're ready. Because the tendency is that people feel that they are not ready to do the reading, that they're still not good enough. And so years go by and they are still not doing professional readings because they feel they are not good enough. However, in the beginning, once you have some sense of competency, as in you have done a few and you know how it goes and you've got a feeling of how it usually feels, then that is enough to start doing channelings where you receive money. And you can do it this way. I'm only going to charge you $25. Usually readings others do, they will charge up to $200, $300, $500. But I'm at the very beginning of my journey. And so what I'm willing to do is, if you are trusting for me to do this service for you, then I'm only going to charge you enough, really just to cover the basics of my time to do this for you. And if at the end of the process it has been unsatisfactory, then I will happily refund the money. And by framing it in this way, it makes it now very simple to give yourself permission to start doing the paid channelings. And then you'll find that you are able to deliver a quality of service that is of a greater value than $25. And so you increase your price, you increase your price, you increase your price, you keep doing them, you keep growing them. You spread word of mouth. And then if you are feeling like you want to take the next step, then you can start becoming a bit more professional in your marketing. You can start advertising, you can start doing offers, and so on and so on. So, we feel that if you go into this realm, that you will find some traction and a great deal of satisfaction, and to the point where you establish yourself as somebody who is actually quite skilled in doing readings. This may be 3 years from your starting point. But if you're willing to put in the time and effort to span that bridge, then when you arrive there, you will find that it has been well worth the journey. Because people seek you out because of the great sense of relief and understanding and focus and direction they receive from the wisdom that you are able to bring to them. So, let us analyze kind of your journey over the last few recent years to illustrate how you are primed to go in this direction now. For you to be a skilled practitioner of your spiritual abilities, and in the suggestion we made to you was to be the clairvoyant and to do spiritual readings for others, then this requires a certain set of conditions for you to be highly skilled and highly valuable in the service that you can offer individuals who come to you seeking this particular type of insight. So, these conditions are that your vibration is high. And so for your vibration to be high, this means that you must be making less low vibration choices and more high vibration choices. And through this process, this very simple rule set, more high vibration choices, less low vibration choices, you slowly begin to increase your vibration. And then this is a mechanism by which your latent spiritual abilities are activated. Your ability to see into the things that you see, to have these feelings, to have these visions, this is all a latent capacity within every single human being. However, it is not until your vibration begins to elevate that these particular latent abilities become activated. And after they have become activated, if your vibration continues to increase, then they become more potent in their intensity. So, now with that in mind, look at what has happened over these last few years. You have shifted your entire spiritual belief and let go of these indoctrinated beliefs of the very formalized and rigid religion that you were inculcated with as a child. So, you have purged that denseness in your spiritual aspect. You have stopped choosing those beliefs. So you are not choosing the lower vibration choice, and you are now choosing the higher vibration choice. You have given up alcohol. Again, this is letting go of a low vibration and choosing the high vibration. You have stopped eating meat, letting go of the low vibration, choosing the high vibration. And then you also are starting to spend less time focused in the physical 3D and more time focused in the spiritual aspect. Again, this is, in some definition, less of a low vibration choice and more of a high vibration choice. So, you can see you have been setting yourself up for you to launch into this new version of who you are. All of these preceding events had to occur. All of these shifts in your belief system, in your identity, in your choices, had to take place for you to be poised and ready to start utilizing these spiritual aspects of self. This hasn't been a coincidence, but rather it has been a coordination orchestrated by your higher self, orchestrated by your guides. You have been inspired and guided to the place that you are at now. So, it is earned or sensible for you to start placing more trust in your intuitive sense. It will not always be correct, because the times that it is incorrect, it is your mind and not your intuitive sense. Your pure intuitive sense is always absolutely correct, because your pure intuitive sense is coming from the higher self and the guide aspect. And your higher self has an expanded vision of the entirety of your life. It can see your past, it can see your present, and it can see your future simultaneously. And so it always knows what is the most appropriate response in every single moment. It is perfectly calibrated. So, when you're able to tap into your intuition and trust it and act on it, then you will be guided very succinctly and wisely through your life. At this place that you're at now, you are still really just beginning to develop these capacities to a level which is beyond what is typical for the average human. So, at this point, place trust in the intuitive feelings that feel the strongest. If it feels really quite strong, then trust that feeling and start moving in the direction of where that feeling is pointing. And then these other feelings you have, these other sensations about the choices that you have, if they still feel to be weak, something that you're still not quite sure of, then it is okay to ignore them for the time being. And if they grow in their intensity, where it now starts to become something which is quite prominent in your field of perception about how you feel about something, then you could say that this now has earned its spot into the threshold where you start acting on those feelings. You start trusting that once it has reached this level of intensity, then it is actually meaningful. And as you develop your spiritual abilities and you start acting more on your intuition, the threshold for which has to be crossed before you can trust it really is your intuition will begin to come down until it gets to the point where you are having sensations or feelings, and maybe it's the first time you even had that thought or that feeling, but you have become so conversant with the language of your intuition or with the language of your team, meaning your higher self and your guides, that you do not need for it to be bombarded at you over and over and over and over and over and over days, weeks and months until you get it, until you trust it. So this is the process. Accept that you are where you are in your life now because you have set it up to be this way. You have intuitively been following the guidance of your team, higher self and your guides, which has got you to this point. So it is wise to continue to trust that same mechanism that has got you to this point, because it has led you down a very satisfying and clarifying and liberating path. The confusion you're feeling about where you are at in your life right now, about where to take the next step, this is not a surprise to us because you have the background that you have had where for most of your life you have been confined by some very rigid beliefs and a doctrine of what is true and what is not true that does not have an allowance or any space for this spiritual aspect of self. And so as you go through this transition, there is inevitably going to be an inner conflict where this version of you that you have recognized and accepted as you for most of your life is now changing or metamorphosing into something entirely different. And this is going to create some sense of identity crisis, of who am I really? Because I'm beginning to believe that I'm something which is kind of still unknown to me. I don't really know this part of myself that much, but I do know this old part of me very, very well. And so to let that go and to step into this new version of myself it does come with a sense of intimidation, a sense of anxiety that I'm heading in the right direction. Because it requires me to let go or give up something which is so large in my self-identity, this part of me that I've been through the decades of my life up until this point. This is where Thor can be of great service to you, because Thor can be a guide of a type in the physical experience. And so he can draw you or encourage you to be more explorative of your spiritual self, and also give you permission to let go of the very dense physical identity that you have had until sort of recent times. Because when he sees you, he very much sees the beautiful spiritual aspect, because this is the eyes through which he sees the world. He is able to see people. This is one of his unique gifts. And one of the reasons that people are drawn to him is because they have a curiosity for this part of themselves, who is their spiritual identity. And he has eyes that see almost exclusively in that realm. So, he will give credence to your spiritual identity which you are awakening to. And this will allow you to make this shift because of the validation that you will receive through him. And in this process, it is important to recall, going back to the way that we began this session, is that if you give him the reins and let him just go as far into the depths as he wishes to go, he will go to a point which is so fringe that it will feel disconnected from you. It will feel irrelevant to your current place and status. So, this is where it is up to you to use your own intuitive instruments and trust that and make your decisions on the basis of how does it feel. And this will be a very reliable way in how you can decide what is relevant, decide what is worthwhile for you to place emphasis on, to investigate more, to absorb and integrate into one's own identity and belief systems. And Thor understands this about himself. He understands that he is fringe. He understands he's on the horizon. He understands that people don't always get him, that people don't always see what he sees. This is something he is very familiar with. So, if there is something which just doesn't resonate with you, then he is quite okay for you to not buy into it to the same degree that perhaps he does. He is very soft and malleable on the edges in that regard. From our experience of him in this particular incarnation. You have only brought to us 2 questions. Usually, we are presented with 5, 7, 8, 10 questions. And the sessions go longer than we have gone so far. So, we would like to give you some information about topics that you haven't actually asked, because from our perspective, they are relevant, important, and also very useful to where you are at this time. We feel it is very pertinent for you to make connection with your guides, to start having a formal relationship with your guides and also with your higher self, what we keep referring to as your team. They are poised, and because of this very dense purple you have in your auric field, you're very immersed in spiritual energy. This means that there is a lot of conductivity between your conscious waking mind and also the realm in which your guides are existing at the moment. So this interface between the two of you is lubricated, you could say, because of this inundation of purple energy. So they are very available to you at this time. An important thing to understand about the guide framework is that your guides aren't off to the side as separate identities, separate entities, waiting for you to notice that they're there. Because this is an inefficient design. In the perfection of the One, the Divine Creator, your guides were incorporated into your life in a much more functional and much more closely networked paradigm, meaning that your guides are actually integrated into your beingness. So, your beingness, which is emanating into the moment as your presence, at all times has a composition which includes your mind, your higher self, and your guides. Your guides are part of your beingness at all times. So, the reason that this is relevant is because it means you are already channeling and have been for every waking moment of your life until this point. Even your presence that you know yourself as. This is because you are being animated by the higher self aspect. Once the higher self is disconnected from the body ceases to be. It is no longer alive. It is a dead body. Because the mind cannot sustain the body. Only the higher self aspect can sustain the body. The mind is an organic artificial intelligence. It's a computation device that has the capacity for self-identity when it isn't utilized the way that it is meant to be utilized. When one places their identity in the mind and the body. I am Wendy. Those are my thoughts. This is my body. When that is exclusively the way that you self-identify, then you have placed self-identity in the mind. But in the truest sense of who you are, it is not actually you. You are the infinite being, which is existing outside of the body, which is the same as saying you are downloading real-time streaming into the body. And then you are emanating that as your presence. The more spontaneous you can do it, the more authentic you are. Incorporated into that download stream are your guides. And so your guides also are part of your emanated presence into the moment. So, you are already channeling. What we are suggesting is that you make a shift from unconscious channeling to conscious channeling. And so the way that this is done is to formalize the process. When you go into the meditation state, divide your meditation into segments. So, for example, perhaps the first part of your meditation is to go into the peaceful zone, to elevate your vibration until you're very peaceful and empty. And then the next part of your meditation may be, for example, to visualize all that you wish to come into your life, to manifest into your perception. And then you may have other sections. And one of these other sections could be speaking with your guides, having a literal verbalized conversation. And if you do this frequently, what will happen is you will begin to have an experience where the information coming through starts to be undeniably not just you. There is always going to be an element that it is you. Because when you channel, you are channeling a group being. If your guides and your higher self are coming through you, then the entirety of that experience is composite. It's you, it's your guides, so it is a group being. Therefore, as you are in there, it is always going to be a first-person experience. It is always going to have an element of that. And if you are unable to believe it is actually happening, then your first person experience of that process will be unbelievable. So, absolutely essential is the mindset that I believe. I believe that I am channeling. Because, of course, you are. You have always been channeling for every waking moment of your life. Because you exist outside of the body and you are download streaming and then channeling yourself, channeling your higher self aspect into the moment with some constituency of your guides. Now, believing that you are channeling does not imply that you believe everything that comes through. Because in the early stages of your channeling growth, you are going to have a large contingent of your mind in there. And so your mind will say things hoping that you perceive it as intuition. Because the mind feels threatened about this idea of you becoming more spiritual, becomes threatened about this idea of you identifying less with the body, less with this identity as Wendy. Because it understands it is mortal. And so it feels threatened by your shift away from what it knows. So it is going to interject things into that experience which you will have doubts about. So, in the beginning, this is just the state of play. It is going to come out and some things will be believable, some things will feel like utter garbage. But what is important in these early stages is not the quality of what comes through, but instead that you are building that particular muscle, your channeling muscle. And each time that you channel, you are establishing a connection with your guides, with your higher self. And then if you do a channeling again without much lag, perhaps the next day or later that week, then you are fortifying and extending that connection. And if you do this over and over and over and over, what begins to happen is when you sit down to do the channeling, you are already very established in your connection. And therefore, you can start bringing through information which is more reliable, which feels more intuitively true, and also which will be more expanding in your perceptions and wise in guiding you through the immediate obstacles you have in your life environment. So, this is also going to be very beneficial for you when you do your readings. Because when you do the readings, you'll be able to go into a channeling state to a degree, where you are using your own intuitive abilities, but also you are using the abilities which have been blessed upon you through your guides. And we don't include higher self in that because you are the higher self. It is not a separate identity. It is actually you. So, of course, in that channeling state, the higher self is being utilized. But we want you to start thinking of the higher self as not something which is foreign and separated and different from you, but rather it is actually you. It's a more true definition of you than Wendy is. So, we are very excited for you. We see there is so much potential in your journey waiting to be utilized. This explosion of self-understanding, discovering a whole new aspect of yourself, is something which can be used as a true power of motivation to drive you forward, to be the pioneer or the explorer, the adventurer that dives deeply into self to discover what is available. What am I truly capable of? What can I achieve and who can I help and heal through these abilities which I am now beginning to become conversant with? we can see a vision of you where you are very potent in the way that you wield your purple energy. And you have developed a reputation where you are sought out by those that are seeking guidance and insight, because you have established a reputation of being very good at what you do. And you feel a deep sense of love and satisfaction from this experience. You are able to meet the financial needs and commitments of your life. And when you look back at the Wendy that you are at this moment, it is done with a sense of humility and amusement at how much you didn't understand about yourself, of how much you still didn't realize how amazing you actually are. When you still thought of yourself as a spiritual beginner, as a novice in the use and expression of the purple energy, which is so richly present in your beingness, in your aura. You had no idea at this time, as you look back from this future version of you, that you are so powerful. So, there are many timelines ahead of you, but this particular timeline we feel has a very strong calibration, a very marked resonance with who you are now and where you are tending to aim yourself. But it will require that you apply and investigate and discover and have the courage to do what is necessary to step in that direction. So, it is entirely up to you. Start trusting life and recognizing that you are a beautiful being and the universe loves you with a sincerity that wishes for you to receive all that you desire from your experience. And so it is conspiring to bring about all that is necessary for you to be in that place of receiving your desires. So, this means that you can begin trusting life. Trusting that life really wants the best for you. Trusting that life is conspiring to bring you that which you require, that which you desire. So, for it to do that for you, it must receive from you a very clear definition of what it is that you desire, what it is you wish to experience. If you convey that to the universe, then it now understands, this is what Wendy wants. Let us make it so. So, at the very beginning of this journey, as you go down this path and achieve all of these things which we are suggesting are available and possible for you, take a moment at the very, very, very beginning. Do this today. Do this tomorrow. Decide what you want your life to look like in all regard. What you want to be doing professionally. What you want to be doing in your relationships. Where you want to live. What kind of money you wish to be receiving. Make a very clear impression about what that looks like. And then let the universe know, this is what I desire. And give thanks that it is so. Do not be in a state of wanting that, because your state of being will create more of that. If you're in a state of wanting, then the universe will always hold it just out of reach, such that you are always in a state of wanting. However, If you tell the universe that is what you want, and you give thanks that you have it, then the universe will conspire to make the conditions where your experience is, I have it. And then as you inch forward along this journey, continue to return your mind to that vision, to re-solidify it, to give it more detail, more texture, to make it feel even more inevitable than it already does. And through this use of understanding, of the malleability of your physical experience, and the use of your burgeoning spiritual capacities, you can step into your dream life. It is very, very, very possible for you. And even if you do not hit the mark, you aim so high that you never quite make it. If you transition from where you are to even midway from that point, you are going to be in a better place than you are now. Your life is going to be more reflective of the things that you desire than it does now. So, begin the journey by creating the vision, and then take the steps which are necessary to bring that vision into your perception. Thank you, and we love you, Wendy.